Five. Alrighty, we are live. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. You're listening to us live on Facebook, and you're listening to a pre-recorded show from last week if you're listening to us on 100.5 Vancouver Co-op Radio. Coming to you every Thursday, noon to 1. This is Giuseppe Ganci and my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
Hello, hello. Big shout out to our viewers / listeners. The fundraising we've been doing for the Co-op Radio. Thank you very much. Our listeners or our show has got just under 2,000, I think.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Keep it coming.
Yeah, keep it coming. And Darren, it's been great doing the show. 7 years. My phone is playing our Facebook Live video. Let me shut that off. There you go. We start the show off with some hot topics every week. And this week, Portland. What is happening in Portland? They just decriminalized drugs. First American city to decriminalize drugs. That's a topic for us because we've talked about this on our show lots of times. I'm in the middle of producing a documentary about decriminalization. Was in Portugal for a little while. Interviewed many people in Portugal and have toured people from Portugal here in Vancouver to really take a look at how decriminalization could help. And to my surprise, you can't do drugs in Portugal, which I found when we were down there. And if you actually pull out a crack pipe or even burn a joint in Portugal, you get a ticket and you get in pretty big trouble. And so I scratched my head. I'm like, but I thought it was decriminalized and everything's okay. And quite the opposite.
Yeah, and can't be that simple.
Can't be that simple. Yeah, they created a treatment industry in Portugal. And so there's something unique. And I talked about this with Darren before the show started. I'm watching all the Twitter feeds about Portland and Canada, what's wrong with Canada and all these like very loud harm reduction voices on Twitter who mean well, but really it's like that's all they're talking about is Portland's decrim rule that they did. But the reality is if you actually read what they did, they created a system where addiction treatment centers actually do assessments on people that do drugs and get tickets. And I'm like, no one is saying that on Twitter Canada. You know what I mean? And I don't know what the problem is, Darren. They take little sound bites and everybody runs with it. It's like I'm not going to name names on who they are on Twitter, but like they're not going to say that treatment centers should be doing assessments on people whether or not they need treatment. Most of these people actually despise that. They call them recovery capitalists, and we're making billions of dollars on addiction when it's like, oh, that's big pharma, not treatment.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It just loses any ground after the decriminalization headline. I mean, I'm pro decrim, but anti, like that's all it is. That there's a point, I guess, in the what's next. I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard too many stories of people doing 5 to 7 years, for a gram of cocaine. Like it's not like that anymore, and it hasn't been for quite some time. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to change. Just decriminalizing everything. The downtown east side is going to be the downtown east side.
Yeah, no matter what. Yeah. And it's the whole idea of, that's a whole other show. But we just wanted to point out, Portland didn't just decriminalize drugs. And so now you can go to the corner in front of, Starbucks and light a crack pipe and smoke. Like you're still going to get a ticket. You're going to get an assessment. Like that's what, I don't know if they're going to follow through with that, but that's what it's all about. And that's how they got the bill passed, or whatever they call it in the States. That's not what they want to do in Canada. In Canada, they just want to it's okay to do drugs wherever you want. And I got news for you. You pull out a crack pipe in Lisbon, you are going to get in serious trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
You even pull out a joint in Amsterdam at a bus stop, you get in serious trouble. Like if you're not in a cafe, you can't even smoke weed in Amsterdam without getting a ticket. So I don't know.
it
That's
doesn't change the societal norm. Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
even smokers are aware
yeah.
as far as, you know, where they're smoking in public. So yeah, an addict isn't going to just walk down the street.
You can't do that in Europe. You'll get in trouble. Not even in Switzerland where they have safe supply. So I think a big problem really is it's the idea that Europe never made it okay to use drugs. They never did. Like I've been there, and like I'm going to Switzerland as soon as COVID's done to do some more filming, and like it's not okay. And I think what's happened in the narrative here is advocates have taken over the healthcare policies where it's okay to do drugs, and it's a big difference. So you'll see more of it. It's going to be in the movie called Crisis. Anyway, we got some guests waiting in the waiting room, so let's get to the show, Darren.
Yeah.
You can follow us if you're listening to us on the radio right now. You can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Talk Recovery Vancouver. All of our replay shows are on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, and coming soon to Spotify. So you can check us there. Go to talkrecoveryradio.com, and all of our replay shows are there. 7 years worth of shows. And our next guest was one of our very first guests when we started this a long time ago. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today first?
Yeah, today we get to talk recovery with Sherry Gaba, like Giuseppe said, a returning guest, psychotherapist, life coach, certified recovery coach, 20 years experience, consultant for rehab centers, has helped celebrities, and of course, the go-to expert for the Dr. Drew Celebrity Rehab, Sober House, VH1's program there. Welcome to the show, Sherry.
Hi. Okay. Are we zooming me like video or just
we video? Yeah.
Oh, well, I wish I would have known that. Can I move then? Because I'm not in the best place.
Yeah.
I look like a dark shadow.
You're a little, yeah, there we go.
A little bit better, but not exactly how I would have looked today, but okay. I'll deal with it.
We can shut your video off if you want. We're okay with that.
No, it's fine. We're good. It's all live and beautiful.
You look great.
I sent you some questions. I'm hoping you have them all about codependency and okay, excellent.
Yeah,
great.
It was all in my, you know, headspace as far as the questions go. Like we're talking codependency. You have a new book called Love Smacked: How to Stop the Cycle of Relationship Addiction and Codependency to Find Everlasting Love. And I mean, your website, sherrygaba.com, so much resource there. Like, you know, so throughout this show, if anybody has any questions about themselves or anybody they're with codependency stuff, check that out. So my first question, it's about the language that we use, and it's been evolving and changing over the years, you know, substance abuse and disorders and addictions. I was looking around, you know, I don't like the DSM-5 or the DSM at all, but I think it's necessary in the healthcare system. But nothing as far as specific codependency. And I've noticed that there's relationship addiction, but it doesn't fall under addiction in there. It says dependent personality disorder. So can we talk just a little bit about, does it matter? Does it have a hindrance to what it is?
Yeah, well, you know, there used to be the idea that codependency was you were the enabler, you were the person that was with the alcoholic, quote, addict. It was coined by Melody Beatty, who actually endorsed my book, Love Smacked. She's a colleague of mine and I love her. And she's really the person that, you know, began this whole movement around codependency, but it was really around the partners of the addict alcoholic. And then it sort of morphed into a much broader definition and really more about losing a sense of self, you know, being someone that came from maybe a history of trauma and shame evolved from that. And so becoming very other focused, feeling very invisible. When you think of codependency, it's sort of a process addiction, such as A process addiction could also be love addiction, relationship addiction. It could be gambling. It could be food, debting. So, I just want to move away from this idea that it's only the partner of a quote addict. I mean, if you have issues like you need a lot of validation, you're a people pleaser, you're always wanting people to like you, you're kind of a person that needs a lot of attention, you're probably a codependent. And then, of course, there also is a movement against this word codependency. There's somebody out there talking about this idea of propendence. And I'm not exactly sure what he's trying to say, except for the fact that maybe we overjudge relationships when you love somebody and you want to help them. I always go back to, support. If we're talking about someone who is in a relationship with an addict or alcoholic, it's really about supporting their recovery, just not enabling their disease. But when we talk about codependency, it's a much, much broader definition today.
Right. And I mean, so one of the symptoms, a codependent isn't going to be in a relationship with a successful, healthy individual.
That's funny. Probably not. They're probably going to be with somebody that sort of meets them where they are, or someone that needs them. They probably could be in a relationship with someone who is an addict, a narcissist. They're looking to fix somebody, and it kind of builds them up, because who am I if I'm not taking care of you? And I was one of those people. I loved an alcoholic, and I had a husband that was an alcoholic. We are divorced today, but my whole obsession was him, and his whole obsession was addiction, his drugs or alcohol. So it's kind of a continuum. It can range from mild to severe. Right. And it includes things like denial. And the reason denial exists is that, well, if I have to accept that this person has an issue, let's say, then I might have to give him or her up. So it's a really easier place to live than to actually accept the situation for what it is. So I'm going to be in love with the illusion of who I want someone to be, or who they could be, their potential, rather than who they really are.
And that's not just a quick and easy answer. There's like a process through that where, somebody who enters into some form of addiction, let's say, maybe wasn't there, at the beginning of the relationship, or deals with something traumatic, and then doesn't get out of it, and you're with that person. And
well, that's where, you're starting to cross your own boundaries, which is what I did at first. At first, my whole job in life was to quote, save him, which of course I realized that was impossible. But yes, when you start getting sick, for me, I got shingles, I had kidney stones, I had a staph infection, I started losing hair. I started to really get sick, trying to help this person. And so that's really crossing my threshold of healthy living. And that's when it becomes, almost pathological. So eventually when I got to that point, I sort of hit my proverbial bottom, just like an addict hits their proverbial bottom. Yeah. I was able to move on and get divorced, but it's hard because when I met the person, there wasn't an issue. And then the issue just became an issue when it became an issue, and when he relapsed in our marriage. So it's a very complicated thing. And I just think we have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves and for the person that we love. But again, thinking about it again from a broader perspective, that codependency is a loss of self. You're really, you've given up parts of yourself that maybe you never knew, because, and gets into the next question about trauma. And I don't know if you want to get into that, but if you,
I want to get into the trauma, but I want to touch on what you just mentioned about boundaries and yourself. You bring up a topic about being radically authentic. And I actually like that sound of those two words together, because Darren has said this a long time ago about we make a constitution with ourselves. And so you're talking about boundaries. How can you be true to yourself, true to your boundaries, in a world where we have people arguing about what's selfless love, what's tough love? Like, they're just like, people are scared to let go. People might die. Do I let them stay in my house? Do I divorce them? How, codependency and being radically authentic, I find is the problem. Like, how does one get through being okay with tough love? Or is tough love even something? Like, how do we stay true to ourselves when we have somebody using, when we have all this stuff going on, which could be related to trauma?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to how is it affecting you? Like we always talk about in the first step, is your life becoming unmanageable? So if your life is becoming unmanageable because of this relationship that you're in, and it's causing you to become sick, and it's taking over your, every aspect of your life, that's where the boundary has to come in. And I think it's different for everybody. I mean, listen, I don't have a child that's an addict, so I can't speak to that. I mean, I can't even imagine. But I do know, people that have children that are addicts, and they definitely have to close the door because it's starting to affect every other area of their life. It might be affecting another child in the family. I mean, nobody wants to see anybody homeless. Nobody wants to see anybody out in the streets, but we have to definitely take care of ourselves. And really, at the end of the day, we're kind of enabling someone if we're not taking care of ourselves. We're sort of letting that person know that, you can walk all over me and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to suffer your consequences, and I'll always be your punching bag.
Right.
And, so being authentic really is being your true self and living in your own truth. Like it's good. I can't really give an answer to someone who has a child that's an addict, or someone who loves an addict or alcoholic. I mean, it's different for everybody. I can only speak from my own experience. And when it got to the point where I was really getting sick, I had to definitely move on, and it was really hard.
I mean, there's the obvious example of being completely taken advantage of, stripping your bank account for somebody else's addiction. Like, the telltale, very definitive measures that a codependent takes. But like you say, there's this manifestation of like physical stress related issues that happen for you in your example. But I'm sure, just like, whether it's the smoker that is developing lung cancer, you know what I mean? Now we're dealing with lung cancer, not the smoking addiction. You know what I mean? Like, is it easier for a codependent to hide in the denial that these are just symptoms of stress and everybody gets stressed and it's work? Like, is it really tough for a codependent to become aware? And if so, let's talk about how they can become more aware, because it sounds like that's the key thing. It's just personal awareness. Mm-hmm. There's no example we could tell right now that would suggest you are or you aren't codependent, but just
well, just like the addict or alcoholic can live in denial for a long time, we can live in denial too of who we're living with. And because we, in fact, when I let my ex-husband come back and live with me for a while, I had said to him, you can stay here, I'll help you get back on your feet, but you have to have a recovery program. And of course he didn't. And of course I slipped back into my own denial, like, oh, well, okay, but at least he's sober, which of course he wasn't. And I didn't know that. But again, it really is so important to be firm in what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And so in that particular case, I slipped back into denial. And so what I needed to really do is to say, I had said, you need to be in a recovery program. If you're not, then you will have to leave. And so it gets really slippery because, you don't want to ask someone to leave, but you have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, the person who's the codependent, is going to become very resentful and very angry. And that's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the addict or the alcoholic. But really what it comes from is at the core of codependency or a love addict or relationship addict is just this need to be attached, this need for connection. They say the opposite of addiction is connection. And so just like we have programs where we have fellowship, where we have community, where we have a tribe, I have a tribe I call Wake Up Recovery. It's for codependents. It's to have a connection to other people so that we don't feel, so alone in what's going on. And because it really is a very, just like alcoholism and addiction, codependency can be very lonely. People just don't get it. People that see that this person is causing all this havoc in your life and they're saying to you, well, why are you putting up with it? Well, easy for them, they're not walking in my shoes. So really important to have community and to have people around you. And a lot of times codependent love addicts, relationship addicts, allow this crossing of boundaries is because we don't even know what our boundaries are. If we grew up and we were, abused or neglected, or our parents were addicts, or we became little adults because our parents were too busy working, or they were excuse me, a single parent. we don't even know like what our needs are, because all our needs were completely ripped from us. So they're sort of lost, and someone comes into our life that needs us, and it's like, well, of course I'm going to take care of you, because I'm so other focused, because it was never about me from the beginning of time. So you have to be, really aware of what kind of trauma did you grow up in, that, because you just don't wake up one day and go, oh, I want to be with an addict alcoholic who's going to take advantage of me and have multiple relapses and ruin my life. It's not quite that simple. It's something in you is
right.
wanting to be with someone that they can take care of, because that's all they know. They were always.
You sit there and you see relationships, and you're like, why did you why did you put up with that? It's unbelievable that you even made it through that. And a lot of it has to do with minimizing the whole idea of being codependent. It's just like, when you start your using days, it's just a little bit of cocaine, it's just a little bit of heroin. And that by the time you figure out it's a problem, you could be homeless, jobless, and no friends and anything. And then it's like, oh, I need help. And I think with, codependency and being in that type of relationship, it's almost the same thing, where it's like, oh, there's bigger problems in the world, get over it, that kind of idea, until somebody's really falling apart. So how do you stop it? Like, how, you know your boundaries, you're breaking them. He's probably not sober, but you're co-signing, and will be different. You're kind of living in someone else's addiction. How do you stop it? How do you break away? How do you get the strength, courage?
And again, it's going to be different for everyone. I mean, I'm thinking of an example. I was in another 12-step program. I don't know if you mentioned names on the show of what that 12-step program is, but it was a 12-step program for family members, loved ones of addict alcoholics. And there was a woman who had been married for years and years to an active alcoholic. And she kept saying in the Zoom meeting, it was a Zoom, meeting, and she kept saying, hate the disease, love the addict, hate the disease, love the addict, hate the disease, love the addict, hate. And I just kept saying, oh my God, you look so miserable, you look so uncomfortable, you're with an active alcoholic. How can you keep saying that to yourself? But then there's somebody else sitting in the meeting saying, I had enough. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't even love the person anymore. I can't even differentiate between, loving the addict, hating the disease. It's just, I can't do it. So it's going to be really different for everyone. But the point is that people are on this call right now, they're listening to us. That's a great first step in healing. And it's becoming aware and conscious, and just aware about your beliefs, about yourself, and really looking at the early trauma that you came from, and why you have chosen to live the life you've lived, in terms of either staying or leaving an addict or alcoholic, if we're talking about that, since this is a recovery radio show.
Well, you're talking about early trauma, but the reality is you're continually causing trauma. That's actually, I want to rephrase that. Are you causing trauma in your life if you continue to stay in a codependent relationship?
Yes, you absolutely are. I mean, I definitely had PTSD after experiencing multiple relapses. I was, he's in and out, and I'm just standing here going, what? It's like I'm in the tornado, and they're not, although I'm sure, but of course they have their own pain and their own tornado, but it's definitely traumatic. And anybody
I just got one more question, and then you can finish this off. I just, on this topic, so many people, all pathways work. Everyone's recovery journey is different. For some people, recovery is abstinence. For some people, recovery is just not using illicit drugs and using safe supply. So I don't want to go down that road. I just want to touch on the idea. So many people, we have the downtown east side of Vancouver, and I really feel there's like a lot of codependency going on in the downtown east side. I mean, you have people that are literally falling to pieces that need triage of care, and we're like, here's a safe supply of drugs, right? And it's kind of like the families had to let go, but now the government's taken over. And it's like, don't give them a clean crack pipe, like they need a hospital room. So my conversation now is, we're not just talking codependency. Once you let somebody go and you hope that they find their recovery journey, how do you deal as a codependent with other people, places, and things kind of taking over like they're not helping your loved one. And how do you deal with that? Because I find that's a big problem with a lot of moms that I've encountered. It's just like, like the system is just, they got my son trapped and I can't get him out. How does one love from a distance but still get involved and trying to help without being codependent?
To always be there when they're ready for help. You don't abandon someone who actually wants help. If they want help, even my ex-husband till this day, when he's sober, I'm there for him. If he's not sober, but he wants help, I'm there for him. And I don't mean in a way like I am with him anymore, but I will help him. You want to find, you need a place to go, you need a recovery center, sure, here's some options. I mean, if somebody wants help, you don't abandon them.
Yeah. And
does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Yeah.
And it speaks so much to the importance of, like you said, the awareness of yourself, being able to admit the unmanageability.
Well, right. Like when he's out there and he's using and drinking and he's calling me at all hours and he's acting crazy, I blocked my phone because I'm not gonna allow that in my life. I just will not allow that. So I'm really, and just because you divorce someone doesn't mean you don't care about them. Right. But I know that if I'm getting too wrapped up and I'm part of this, hamster wheel, I know I have to block my phone, and I'm really clear. And if you do that enough times, they don't call you anymore. They only call you when they are either sober or they know that you will help them get help because they're ready for help.
And once that help, or just at least the beginning phase of a community of other people, a little bit of work on yourself, understanding why you're doing that, understanding of the trauma that you may have be dealing with, in an unresolved way. Like after that, the exact same person struggling even more, you can attend to. You can, we are capable. It's not just about cutting ties and letting go, but if we help ourselves, we're then able to be less reactionary. We're not making decisions and doing things based on that trauma that's unresolved, and we can be more helpful. And
right, because at this point, we've built up an identity for ourselves. We have
right.
Self-esteem. We can assertively express our feelings and our boundaries and our wants and our needs. Now we've learned self-responsibility, and we've understand our early PTSD and our early trauma and why we do the things we do. And then from there, it just gets even better. You gain a capacity for autonomy and intimacy and relationships and, real intimate relationships. And of course, I'm not just talking about sex, but real connection. And then you experience your own power of self-love, and you feel expansive and creative and resourceful. You can, generate your own goals. I mean, after I got divorced and I could focus on me, I took up outrigger canoeing and, made new friends. And, I just completely had a full life, a wholehearted life. And that's really what we all want. And that's really living, right? Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we can't all do all the things that we love doing, but, we're just doing the best we can.
Was there a process for you? So addiction is a disease. The media tells us compassion for people that are using drugs. It's not their fault, and let's show them compassion. So, did you have to go through the process of forgiving your husband? Because you get pain, you get hurt, you get to this place now where you understand, how to break free from that cycle. Some parents I've talked to, and they feel bad that they're mad, and they feel like, is it something like it's a disease? Do I need to forgive somebody for using drugs? But obviously there's all the consequences. So how do you suggest these people that aren't where you're at in life and are still struggling, where, they're mad at their kid, or they're mad at their husband or wife, and, they're mad at not mad at the disease, like mad at the person. And
I think it starts with forgiveness for yourself. Like I did a lot of beating up, like, oh, how could I spend all those years? And why did I waste all that time? And, my early 50s are gone now. What am I going to do with those? I'll never get those years back. And then, you kind of wake up and go, there is no reason to live in regret. you know, I am a spiritual person. I believe that that was supposed to be, that was supposed to happen. And so I've just have a lot of forgiveness for myself. And I've never been angry. Have I been disappointed that the dream that I had didn't occur? Just like a parent had a dream that their kid was going to go to college or, you know, get married, be a grandparent, whatever their dreams were. Yeah, that's disappointing. But, you know, life isn't always fair, right? And it doesn't always turn out the way we want it to be. And I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing. I wouldn't be the kind of therapist. I wouldn't have the program, my books, all the things that I do to help others if I hadn't gone through what I went through. So for me, it's a blessing in disguise. It's like it made me just a much better person in the recovery field. But, you know, that's easy for me to say. You know, I don't have a child out there strung out. And for those parents that do have a child out there strung out, I am so, so sorry. And what I would say to anybody is, you know, you have to find your own path, your own support system. And then you have to understand that they have their path, and we can't control that path. That path is really the path that they're going to take. Either they're going to get help or they're not.
It's so important to remember, even like someone such as yourself, like a professional, an expert, you know, somebody in the know, you know, like you couldn't have any more information around the topic. And even myself, I think, you know, I look at my 5-year-old sometimes and I'm like, you know, like I can prepare myself from this day to when he's 17, you know, to be as prepared as I can be in this situation. Once the emotions hit, once the powerlessness hits, I am going to absolutely react from an emotional place, unresolved, you know, all of that stuff, and I'm going to make huge mistakes. And so, you know, to think that there's this just sort of one specific set of, this is what you do, this is when you do it, is probably the most frustrating thing around this topic. You know, like, when do you let someone go? When do you cut them off? These questions are, they're mind-boggling to me when I'm given them, you know. And it's like this pandemic, the situation now where we had a guest say, you know, we have to go inside to look inside, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that was sort of the benefit of this whole situation. But unfortunately, not everybody's prepared for that. And this is sort of forcing,
sorry about the dog.
Oh, it's good. It's fine.
Okay. Go
this
ahead.
is sort of forcing individuals to get out of their, you know, routines of distraction, let's call it, and are starting to lose their minds in subtle ways, moods, depression, anxieties. It's a really weird time. Is this situation creating, you know, codependencies to people and things outside ourselves? Or is it just bringing it out? That was
no, it's definitely worse than it's ever been, because you're locked in the house with somebody 24/7, and sometimes financially you can't get out, and now you're living with these partners, you know, 24 hours. You know, you really have to figure out what your boundaries are at this time. You have to definitely not take advantage of each other if you can help that. You know, one partner may be working, the other partner isn't. And so there's this financial resentment, and you've got to really keep, you know, in check your controlling behavior, your resentment. It's so important to just really stay on your path, not get into their business. You know, really giving each other the capacity to find their own way, give them space, give them support, but don't tell them what to do. Really be in check with your own stress. I mean, a lot of the things that we're seeing is anger and neediness and resentment, and people are becoming controlling. And so we have to be really mindful of staying connected to ourselves, really staying connected to a recovery community.
Right.
And that's really sometimes the best we can do.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to be in contact and in connection to one. I'm just thinking of the individuals during this situation that it's just starting to bubble out, and how important it is to sit down, watch a show, listen to a podcast, you know, read a book,
Yeah, there's no excuse. Like in my mind today, there is so much recovery, whether you decide to do a 12-step program. I think you'll have my, I don't know if you have show notes, but you'll have the name of my community for codependence, Wake Up Recovery. There's zillions of podcasts just like yours and many others, many, many books. When my first book came out, there weren't as many recovery books. Now there are zillions of them. There is so much support out there that there's just no question you can find support. You just have to
get information at sherrygaba.com. Sherry, thanks for being on our show. We always love having you, and welcome back. The book is called Love Smacked, and you can get that at sherrygaba.com. And about your codependency community, you can go to wakeuprecovery.com, and there's information there. And Sherry, best wishes with this book, and I know it's going to help a lot of people. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, because
my pleasure. And I'm really very honored that you asked me again to be on your show.
Thank you, Sherry. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. That was Sherry Gaba. We're going to say bye to her. Sherry, we'll see you again on the show when you got your next book out there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Star Recovery Society and Westminster House. And that's Canada's recovery community. And you can catch us every Thursday here, noon to 1. And we try to bring as many addiction recovery stories to the airways as possible. And you're listening to us on Vancouver Co-op Radio. Thanks to everyone that's donated to the fall fundraiser. I think they've raised like 30K or something. And you can always make a donation at vancouvercoopradio.org. And we have Autumn on the show. Hello, Autumn Rock. She's connecting to audio. Connecting to audio. Hi, Autumn. Are you there?
Not just yet.
I've had the TikTok songs. Anyway, Autumn's on air. Hello, Autumn. Nice to see you.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm doing well for Rock Life Recovery and Success Strategies, Strategic Interventions, Life and Recovery Coaching. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you for inviting me.
Yep, and we're here with our co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Darren,
Hi, Mr. Darren. How are you?
Hello.
I've known Autumn for a while through our Clean, Sober, and Proud and Vancouver Pride activities and so forth. So we got connected. I was like, hey, you need to be on the show. You've got lots going on.
I do.
Can you believe people don't know what a recovery coach is?
Yes, I can.
It's sad. We're in the middle of an overdose crisis. And it's like, what's that? Why do we need them? I don't know. Why do we need recovery coaches?
That's your first question. That's a big question. Thank you.
Smaller, Giuseppe.
Well, here's what I can tell you is that so what I found is that I have 24 years, almost 24 years, clean and sober. I've been in recovery my whole adult life. I've been working with women in recovery that whole time, and with men and other genders as well, but primarily women. And over that time, what I've seen is that people who are seeking recovery, that I just so happen to have a lot of that time spent in Vancouver. And so what I've seen is that people who are seeking recovery can easily fall through a lot of gaps in the system. So we have a lot of wonderful places in our system, but people will call me, for instance, and say, I want recovery. I'm finally ready. I'm going to get myself off the street. I'm going to do this thing. And I'll say, great. First thing we need is detox. And then there's a waiting list for detox. Mm-hmm. And before detox opens, they fall off they fall back into those old patterns, disappear, and sometimes they don't make it. Next, what happens is they get out of detox, and sometimes there's a waiting list for treatment. And so then they can fall through that gap right there. Then they get out to treatment, and then there's, there's sometimes there's aftercare programs available. A lot of times there's not. So then they're headed right back into the life that was triggering a lot of their reasons or needs to use in the first place, without a whole lot of support, or maybe, being directed to go to 12-step meetings where they're sort of walking. I don't know about you. The first time I went into a 12-step meeting, I felt super lost. I was scared.
I was
Just
high.
you were high. You know what I mean? And so you get in
You were
there, and
too,
it's like,
Darren.
what the frack am I doing here now? I was a 21-year-old woman who was scared and pregnant, and had experienced an extreme amount of trauma, walking into a room where I had went straight out of detox and into that room, and was told I was going to find support there. And what happened to me was that I did find some support there. I found some wonderful people. I found a large group of wonderful people, but embedded into that wonderful group of people was some people who were not safe. I mean, we come straight out of addiction. We come straight out of getting our needs met through these random and sometimes dishonest or predatory behavior. And then we get into these meetings, and all of a sudden we're expected to be cured. No, that's not it. We're still behaving in these ways. And sometimes those ways can be harmful and peer support to one another.
And
so
that's just par for the course in society. Like, how many
society at
am I going
large
to leave my child with at the playground while I run to the bathroom for 10 minutes?
Exactly.
You can advertise all day long that this is a safe and trusting environment, but it only takes one person to disrespect that,
At time, it only takes that one. And so my personal experience, and again, I want to express that this is not everybody's experience. My personal experience was that as a 21-year-old girl, I walked into recovery. I was, again, pretty fragile, very vulnerable, and I was preyed upon. And I was preyed upon in a way that that was really detrimental. Now, as a blessed individual who had a mom who was in codependency recovery, I was just listening to your last show. Thank God for the codependence in the world. I still am so grateful for her. I mean, I went home and I said, that's it. I fucking quit. Excuse my language. I hope F-bombs are allowed on your show, because I dropped them.
It's live. It's going to be on the radio. So don't.
Okay, I'm going to stop with the F-bombs. Excuse me. So I said, that's it. I quit. Right? I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm never going back to those meetings. You know what? And in fact, what will happen? I can get that treatment in the bar. And when I'm in the bar and I'm drunk, I know precisely how to deal with that. Or when I'm high, I know how to deal with that. But when I'm here and sober, I don't have a clue. And I would have handled those guys like that in the drunk world. But sober, I had no idea.
Right.
And I almost quit. And had I quit, I might not have made it here. And she said, love, I hear you. Thank God, I hear you. I understand. I believe you. I want you to go back. And I want you to find at least one woman and talk to her about your experience. And I talked to this one woman, and she stood up for me, and she was amazing. As I was telling her the story, she was kind of a short woman, and she was sitting behind the table. And as I was telling her the story, it was as though she grew, because she was so angry. She was coming up and over the table, and she was like, who was it? Who was it? It's beautiful. And her sacred anger, when I was not in touch with mine, led us back to that meeting, led me to, for the first time, use my own voice, right? Now, I've seen a lot of other women who didn't have those privileges, and men, in fact, because these things don't only happen to women. They happen, abuse isn't gender specific. So what happens is we're losing people because sometimes peer support simply isn't enough.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to fall back on a professional. So why I, after 22 years of long-term sobriety and recovery, chose to become a recovery coach, chose to get the training because I think that, we need to have professional training, because we need to be trauma informed. We need a diverse pathways to recovery are necessary, because the other thing that happened to me was that at 16 years clean, I was doing all of the things that they told me to do in 12 step. I was doing them. I was sponsoring 8 women. I was being sponsored. I was practicing the steps. As a matter of fact, I was rigorously practicing the steps in a way that later on my therapist said to me, you managed to re-traumatize yourself through the steps and activate trauma pathways that induced a full breakdown, because what I needed was professional support around
Yeah.
around undiagnosed CPTSD, which I also suffered, which the idea of being comorbid or having more than one thing that we're dealing with in these rooms, the idea that any person walks into a recovery room and they just have using to deal with and that's it is far gone. Like, it's really far gone.
You just described like perfectly the necessity for, for lack of a better term, an outside sort of influence or resource of information. Like,
exactly.
no
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, the message is clear in 12-step meetings, but it's not sometimes clear enough for all of that in which you just described.
Sure. And a lot of what we do, or what I do with clients, is I sit down with them and we discuss what their strategy is. So what we can do is we can take from a diverse set of tools, from a diverse set of professionals, from a diverse array of I want to say patchworks. They, in She Recovers, they talk about pathways and patchworks. So what I want to say is we can take the bigger puzzle and we can help put that together. And then we can help meet barriers and place boundaries around these real challenges that we're going to meet while pursuing recovery. So if that makes any sense.
Perfect sense. I'm wondering, in your experience, in your opinion, what is the difference, say, for a life coach,
Yeah,
that's different from being a sponsor, that's different from being a therapist? You know what I mean? Like, if someone needs your services, how, like, am I doing? Am I giving them like a false resource because they need a therapist, or is it just too much because they only need a sponsor? Like, where do you set the boundaries of, what your role is in the whole scheme of things?
well, that's a very, very good question. And I think an important question for coaches to be asking themselves,
Right.
and for sponsors to be asking themselves, right? Um, so sponsorship, to
Basically, I'm
my
just asking when I can start charging my sponsees.
that's a really funny statement. And you know what, it's interesting because I've been accused of
Yeah.
on Recovery Canada. I had one guy say to me, I've been accused of betraying 12-step programs by choosing to be a professional. I've been called publicly on a full recovery, like Canada-wide recovery Facebook page, that I was called a self-appointed guru of recovery dollars. So you take a lot of heat when you choose to be a coach in this world. Yeah, it's not an easy trail to blaze, I'll tell you, right?
Yeah,
And
and
so,
all yoga instructors should be doing it for free as well. Like,
well, so I guess again, so what a 12-step, my understanding of my role as a 12-step sponsor, and I am a 12-step sponsor.
okay.
So my role as a 12-step sponsor is to help people navigate the 12 steps. It's to help people navigate that particular pathway through recovery.
Right.
So here's where we'll divert into coaching a little bit. So say we have someone who has tried they've done the 12 steps, they're still experiencing all sorts of barriers. They're going, what am I doing wrong? They're hearing that spot in the AA book where it says, you know, those who have, you know, those people who are not successful at this are fundamentally incapable of being honest with themselves. They're going, they're feeling that shame wholeheartedly, and why am I not getting it, and blah 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 blah. You know, in roles of recovery coach, and we say, okay, so what are your barriers? What are your barriers per se for you know, I was just in a meeting this morning, in the Diverse Pathways to Recovery meeting, which I host, and you know, I'm blessed to do so. We were talking about how some people, the idea of God, the idea of any sort of deity, is an incredible trigger for people. And they just cannot wrap their brain around that. They cannot spiritually bypass their disease. They are not willing or able to do such a thing. Does that make them fundamentally incapable of being honest with themselves? Absolutely not. But it does mean that they require something else, something more, something different. And so when what we're saying, and Giuseppe said it perfectly the last time we were talking, when he said, you know, this is an and thing, not an or thing.
Right.
This is an and thing. And so what happens then is we can look at those barriers. We can say, okay, what is it? What is it? And then what we can do is pull together other pieces of that puzzle. And sometimes one of the pieces of that puzzle really does need to be therapy.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a therapist, but I have a lot of therapist friends. And I have a lot of therapists that I refer people to. And in therapy, people are going into the deep, dark places within themselves to really rectify some of their traumas, some of their mental health issues, you know, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, where sponsors tend to step over their boundaries is when they make themselves out to be that higher power in their sponsees' lives. And they start telling their, you know, what we talk about in coaching is a self-directed life. Recovery means that we're getting back a self-directed life, where we're getting back the ability to, you know, to have within our spiritual practice, the ability to really know our own values. And some of us aren't going to get there through a God understanding. We need to just look at, what are my values? What is the basis of which I want to conduct myself going forward, and then live from there? We're not going to be able to put that through that spiritual practice. I have a spiritual practice. It works for me. For some other people that I coach, they can't go there. So I think I've answered your question.
I think what's happened over time too, especially the last decade, you know, BC is recognized. I had some Twitter troll tell me how
there's always a troll, isn't there?
BC is at the forefront of addiction healthcare in the world, and how everybody looks upon us as the.
Have you read about Portugal?
And I'm like, have you walked down Hastings? Like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, it's a war zone. And I think, you know, my experience, this isn't, you know, my experience from sitting at stakeholder meetings, you know, with politicians, family members of people who have passed away, active drug users, people behind a lot of drug policy in this province, if not the country, Health Canada and Ottawa, like sitting down in rooms, it's almost like, oh, that's cute, your little abstinence recovery story. It's like a thing that's like not, you know, like it's that worked for you. You know what I mean? It's almost like devaluing someone's lived experience. But then, you know, you have somebody who is actively using, and it's like all these resources and research have been pumping one model.
Yes.
And there's no federal funding stream to find out about recovery. It's all about harm reduction, and it pits us against each other. Like I'm like everything. I'm like, do it all. Like whatever you want to do. Just when I want to open a door, I want to make sure it's not locked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my journey of accessing treatment over a decade ago is not the same for somebody that's on welfare today. I know it's not, right? So how do we move forward? Because we talked a little bit about this. It's like there's the 12-step camp, the life ring camp, the smart camp, it's all about trauma camp. Um, it's not about trauma camp. And we just need decrim and safe supply, and the world will just be a happy place. And they just don't even know that how hard it is to get an alcoholic into rehab. It's like that safe supply. It's hard to get a drunk into rehab. So what are you doing to help people? So somebody comes to you, Autumn, and it's like, I can't stand those damn meetings anymore. Like I can't stand them.
Yeah,
Hate
they do.
So there was a world out there that'd be like, well, they're not evidence-based, they kill, don't go. Like I know there's a world out there that says that. So how do we help people not hate the 12 steps and love another model and respect? Like, what is it? What do we need to do? Because you're in the middle.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so like, what do you recommend? Because I know there's people listening that if they have to go to another meeting, they'd rather just use, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's what I have a few things to say on that, and I'll hope for your patience. And so one thing I'll read to you first is from this book. It's called Daring Greatly, and it's from Brene Brown. Now she's a wonderful researcher out of Houston. She's done a great deal of studies around shame and shame research. A lot of us in the recovery practice call addiction the disease of disconnect. Well, why do we want to disconnect? So I just want to read to you this thing, okay? Because I think it's valid. It says, we live in a world where most people subscribe to the belief that shame is a good tool for keeping people in line. Not only is this wrong, but it's dangerous. Shame is highly correlated with addiction, violence, aggression, depression, eating disorders, and bullying. Researchers don't find shame correlated with positive outcomes at all. There is no data to support that shame is a helpful compass for good behavior. In fact, shame is more likely to be the cause of destructive and hurtful behaviors than it is to be the solution. So now when we want to then go into recovery circles, and as a 12-step person, shame coaches, as a person who believes in harm reduction, shame abstinent-based recovery, when we want to go into a room and shame one another's pathway to recovery, what we are doing is pouring fertilizer on the disease. We're pouring fertilizer on addiction. We're pouring fertilizer on the problem. So first, we must have a basis of understanding whereby we have agreed to not grow one another's shame source. I think that's our first step. Secondarily, I think we need to start really, really thinking about what it means to have safe culture. Because I think one thing that we can agree on all around is that we need to have a safe culture in which we can go and connect with one another, get resources, and do this and move forward together, right? And if we don't respect diversity in recovery, diversity in one another's recovery, diversity in the individual, right? Like as a gay woman, with long-term sobriety, I sat in meetings and said, hey, you know what? Not one woman in this meeting has had an opportunity to talk. Please let us have a voice, right? But here's what UBC describes as safe culture. So just a second, it says, a culturally safe environment is a spiritually, socially, and emotionally safe, as well as physically safe for people, where there is no assault, challenge, or denial of their identity, of who they are and what they need.
Do you believe that exists in the rooms?
I think it needs to exist as we evolve.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I think we need to evolve into this. I think we need to evolve into respecting one another's pathways to recovery, because the more we come at each other in these ways, again, the more we fundamentally encourage really failure overall.
And it's funny because it brings up in my mind the fact that the only people responsible are those that are in our positions, that people that have gotten well, that have, now been able to have a voice. You can't blame a sick person who hasn't begun their process for, having judgments and being that bully and saying those things or feeling that way. It's the people that are speaking for a certain agenda. Those are the people that are the only ones to step up.
Certainly, certainly. And I do hear you. And yeah, I think it is up to us professionals. I think it is up to us people who have been around for long-term recovery. I think it is up to us. But what are we doing then, right? Because I think you used a really imperative word.
So just because this gets rebroadcast on the radio, I want to keep talking, but for those of you that are listening on the radio, the show's going to wrap up in a couple of seconds. So you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. We're here every Thursday. I just want to do a soundbite out there. We're going live on Facebook a little bit over time, but thanks for listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio. Darren, say goodbye to our fans on the radio.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right,
now I want to know the word that I used.
We usually end the show right now, but I have another question for you as well. Sorry to interrupt your thought, but I just wanted to get that soundbite for those listening on the radio. I don't know if you can continue on what you were talking about there.
Oh, I sure can.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, so the word is blame. And again, when we begin to blame anybody, instead of holding these mutual held values of dignity and respect, we're entering into the shame land. So we can hold those things and we can ask other people, even as they walk into the door, we can set a stage for safe culture and we can hold the space in that way.
Can I ask a question here? So I think this is the fire question, okay?
Okay.
We're all on the same page, but like the narrative.
But that's the imperative word.
I know. When I was new, I needed to be challenged. I needed to be told the truth. I like at the time I was mad and thought you're mean. And I look back now in hindsight, and I'm like thanks for saying that. I didn't say thanks when you told me, but like I didn't know, like I didn't know. Like I honestly didn't know how I was hurting people, places, and things. Like I thought people, places, and things were just hurting me, right? So I went through that process in step 6 and 7 and all that, and it was a process, right? And it's different for everybody. So my question is, how do we still hold people accountable in a world that we can't challenge people? Because a big part of people that are kind of anti 12-step recovery think because we're abstinence is shameful. How do you balance that out? Like what do you think? Like how do you not get challenged? And I'll leave it on this because I know people that I know their story, and I know they went through what they went through when they were new, and they went through their challenges and were challenged. And then 2 years later, they're walking around the downtown east side with a naloxone kit and army boots and like just meeting people where they're at. And it's just like, I know your story. Like people met you where you're at and helped you move forward. Like, why aren't you like if people would have done to you what you're doing to people, like you'd probably not have a job, Do you just get what I'm trying to get at?
Sort of. I think I'm understanding your question to be, how do we hold each other accountable without shame or blame or challenge?
There you go.
And so I wrote this thing, it's called the Safe Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Pledge. And I wrote this thing because it's what I felt my community, I'm the local pride president in my community. And I wrote this thing because, because I felt it was necessary. I felt it was necessary for the unity of our community. And so in it, it says, I'll advocate for safe, equitable, diverse, and inclusive communities. It says, I'll connect, collaborate, communicate, and create in cooperation with those who are doing the same. I will look within myself to see where I can overcome bias and improve my personal level of awareness and behavior. I will speak against or walk away from hate speech, destructive communication, and oppressive behaviors. I'll vote for kindness. And then it says, I'll share my gifts, time, talents, and platforms to raise the bar around communications, policies, and organizations. I speak in favor of safe equity, diversity, and inclusion. I will be the change I want to see in the world. And so when we're doing that, so I had a situation, so newcomers, not newcomers, we all need to be held accountable. And so last week I wrote this thing, I was super ticked off. There was one of my female friends had been really entered into a conversation where she had been degraded, and it was not good. And so I spoke online about how this was not okay with me and blah, blah, blah. And I wrote this little rant, which sometimes I do. And then later on, a friend of mine challenged me underneath there. And she said, I feel genuinely as though this is destructive communication. I feel genuinely that some of you have overgeneralized around men, and this has become counter discrimination. And so she did speak against or walk away from hate speech, destructive communication, and behaviors, and oppressive behavior. She spoke against that. She spoke against, and she spoke up about holding a standard of behavior. And then I took the part of the pledge and looked within myself to see where I could overcome and improve my personal level of awareness and my own biases. And I reread the thing, and I had made overgeneralizations, and I changed those. And so even at 23 years sober, 23 years abstinence-based, and trauma-informed, and all the things, I still make mistakes that I need to be challenged about. And I still need people to remind me of the bar we're holding so that I can be in line with my integrity and my own personal values. Because when it comes down to it, for me to stay in recovery at all, I need to have my daily practice align with my values and my own integrity. Those have to be in line, or I immediately become diseased, uncomfortable, and I will search something outside of myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's something I know for me personally. Giuseppe, may have his own experience, but just in doing this show and claiming that this show is about all pathways, mm-hmm. and how we often advocate more for recovery than harm reduction. Like I got to be really careful when I say what I've done, because immediately I can now then sound righteous with anything I say after that. Mm-hmm. Right. And, and be anti everything else just because I've shared my own personal beginnings and story. And yet that's not my intent. But if I listen back, if I reread what I've said, you know what I mean? Like you just described that, yeah, maybe I can gain some understanding and have more dialogue and different ways of communicating, which I think brings it back the important role of a life coach that isn't going to stand next to the person having troubles in a certain pathway and be like, no, everything else out there is bull, like this is the only place for you, which sometimes we can do. And rather not allow, like I think Giuseppe was trying to get like that, oh, you just want to go somewhere else. Things are getting too hard, you just want to go somewhere else. And allow that to happen. And that there's someone that should be paid, that should be seen as a professional, that's gonna be there in the middle ground
to help bridge that gap. Yeah.
And advocate for that individual and anything that they can do, and be able to not just go with them and hold them accountable.
I tell you, Darren and Autumn, like that's, everybody talks about Portugal as the country that decriminalized drugs. Like if you're watching, listening, this is actually what they did. They created a nonpartisan commission that is made up of recovery coaches. Nobody talks about that. I don't know why.
Yeah. The most important aspect.
The most important aspect is that they replaced it with actual professionals. Yeah.
In front of a group of professionals, And it's not that they don't care, it's just they're not attached to a model, a pathway, a prescription medication. Like if you're on methadone or not, they're not going to tell you you're going to die if you don't take it. But it's just a different approach. What they are is recovery coaches, and they help guide you through the system of care. Where do you want to go? Or that didn't work, go here. That didn't work, go here. Then when you get to that facility that you chose, that's the model that they're going to hold you accountable to because you chose to go there. It's like,
that's what works for you. Yeah.
and if it doesn't work, you go back to the commission and you go somewhere else and you do 2 years, 1 year outpatient. And I think that's what we need at St. Paul's Hospital. We don't need a clinic that only gives you Suboxone. We need a clinic that is like, what do you want to do? Nothing, something, right? So we're running out of time. We got to go. Autumn, what's your website? How do people get a hold of you? Are you on Facebook, Insta? Where are you at?
All the things. Yeah. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. I believe wholeheartedly that we'll have more success when we embrace diversity. Yeah. If you want to see me at the Diverse Recovery Paths or Diverse Paths to Recovery, you can find that on a Facebook group called Rock Life Recovery and Success Strategies. Again, that's on Facebook. We have meetings Tuesday evenings and Thursday mornings at 11 a.m. And then you can find me at rocklifestrategy.ca. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you want to talk more about what it means to be a coach, what training is involved, I really believe that we could do with more people who are interested in helping people find the path that works for them.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the show, Autumn. I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was great. Darren, good to see you.
Feeling good.
One day in person.
I'm inspired.
I'm inspired too. Thank you very much. And we learned a lot from today's show. Hope you enjoyed our show, everybody. You can catch us every Thursday, noon to 1, right here on Facebook Live. And of course on the radio, 100.5 FM. Bye, Autumn.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye, Darren.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.